Welcome in. We are live talking to you about Chase Elliott and the ugly truth. What happens to Chase Elliott's legacy if he does not make the playoffs this year? We'll talk about here next on Stuck in the Catch Fence. Hello, everyone, and welcome in. This is Stuck in the Catch Fence. I'm Ryan Peters with the long lost but now found Joe Spillman.
Yeah, just got out of jail last night. I'm ready to go.
You did just get out of jail last night. Do you want to tell us any of your stories in jail? Is that type of thing that, what happens in jail stays in jail? What, lay this in.
I'm going to keep those stories to myself. Don't want
Family
to call
watching.
any of my, family's watching. Don't want to call any of my cellies out. I did.
Is that the language?
Yeah. And I started to get a teardrop tattoo, but it hurt a lot. So I just have a little speck.
Yeah, well, I'm sure the thing that caused you to have tears hurt a lot too. So, it is what it is. But,
Right.
Well, Joe, I'm glad you're back. Other people are glad you're back. Look, we have people going on strike, and we don't even pay these people.
I know.
I mean, how about that?
I know. Well, you could thank the criminal justice system for my absence, Zach.
And then Martin Truex fan said hi, and he is also happy that Truex got another win, which I couldn't. That is shocking considering his name is Truex Fan 19.
Right. Yeah. It's a long shot there to see that. And just to clear the air, I was not in jail.
No, prison.
Prison.
But Joe, I want to get into this with you. This isn't necessarily the weekly show, but it's something I wanted to talk to you about, and something that I think has been going across the social media sphere. I haven't talked with my cellies, my posse, my crew.
My
foe. Yeah. So we had a race on Monday, which for us working people is difficult. NASCAR fans typically do have to go to work.
Right.
Very blue collar, hard to catch a noon start time race. Things of that nature. You, best offensive coordinator in the country, have things to do even after you get off work. So
right.
If we were going to do a post-race show, it would have been later Monday night. And then by that time, just wasn't a lot there that happened. It was a solid race. So do you want to give your 2 cents on what we saw for New Hampshire?
Martin Truex won. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. I ended up watching the 15-minute condensed version. So I got to see the wrecks. I got to see the winner. But as you said, it was a noon race. I coach football till about 9 o'clock every night when I get off work, and it's hard for normal people to watch a Monday or a Tuesday race at this time of year, especially for me. I coach 2 football teams, a high school team and a 5th and 6th grade team, so I didn't get to catch every aspect of the race. It did look like a solid race. It looked like, to me, just in the condensed version, that there was a lot of battling. It looked like they raced all 3 stages. I will say that, but I didn't get to catch all of the law of what you typically have in a normal race either. So, and you're absolutely right, Zach. Excuses are like assholes, and I'm not trying to make them. I'll try to do better for you next time.
And so are people that act tough behind a keyboard, Zach.
Yeah.
They're typically assholes too.
That reminds me of that Dennis Leary song. You ever heard that? He's an asshole.
Dennis Leary has a song?
Oh, yeah. He's an asshole. Asshole. It's a good song.
Never heard of it.
Google it.
No, I am not Googling a song by Dennis Leary. If you only have 15 minutes to watch the condensed version of a race, I don't have enough time to watch a Dennis Leary song.
Well, let me
God,
you...
this is why we go live. Jeez,
yeah.
Pete.
Sorry, people.
Never mind, Zach. You were right. This guy's an asshole.
Sorry, people. Hey, so here's the deal. I'm going to give you one line from.
He's right. I can't provide Dennis Leary songs.
I'm going to give you one lyrical line from the Dennis Leary "I'm an Asshole" song, and hopefully we don't get copyrighted. Dennis Leary, as quoted by Dennis Leary, he parks in handicapped spaces to watch handicapped people make handicapped faces because he's an asshole.
That's rough. That's rough. That's pretty dark.
You got to look it up.
Welcome to Stuck in the Catchments. I don't even know how we got here. I mean, this is a 4-car pile up. I don't know what happened. This is Chicago. So let me get this straight, Joe. You watched a 15-minute version. I didn't watch the 15-minute version, so I'm going to ask you this: that it probably showed Martin Truex in first a lot. It showed Kyle Busch's horrific weekend, probably the worst weekend I could ever remember, where he didn't get hurt, and then a couple wrecks that really didn't mount to the top 10 at the time.
Right. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Yeah. Larson had a decent day. Logano had a decent day.
He was the only one on Hendrick that had a decent day.
Yeah, AlexBowman wrecked. That's what I picked up in the condensed version. So yeah. So yeah, I did watch it while at work. I have to admit, if you're not a Truex fan, then it was probably boring. And that's actually leading me to my point, Truex fan, is that when Martin Truex does win a race, it typically is boring because he dominates. And that's okay. I used to be on the other side of that as well as a Kyle Busch fan. I cannot tell you how many times that I have watched a Kyle Busch race and everybody was like, oh my God, that was terrible. And I'm like, well, yeah, your guy wasn't in victory lane. So Martin Truex, when he wins this year, he's won in dominating fashion. He has not been like William Byron, a couple times this year. I wouldn't say necessarily backing into wins, but very, very close. So at the end of the day, it was New Hampshire. The restarts, they got 4 or 5 wide. And, I thought it was serviceable. It would have been a nice Sunday race in the middle of work on a Monday when you had to try to speed it up and catch through it, Joe. You probably did the right thing and did not watch the whole thing. And at the same time, when you're like me and your guy wrecks in practice, wrecks in qualifying, and then wrecks in the first stage, I could have tuned out pretty quickly, but I did stay tuned. Right. Yeah, and it is what it is. I'm sad that I missed the race. I don't like missing races in their entirety. I try not to do that because I do enjoy watching NASCAR races. But at the end of the day, I have a job and I have to put food on my table at home because my kids like to eat, and that kind of comes first. And I wish they could work something out when they do have to delay a race, that they could put it in maybe prime time the following day. When normal people are off work. I know if you have a shift job and you work second shift or third shift, that'd be hard to do. But, almost nobody could watch it when it's at noon on a Monday, because even if you are one of those people, you're sleeping. So,
yeah. And that place doesn't have lights. So that's also another great thing about New Hampshire. Truex says that so far this season has been amazing. And I think it has been a really good season. I don't know if it's beat last year's season because things were kind of crazy last year as well.
And I'd say the season's had its ups and downs. I mean, we've seen some pretty poor short track racing this year, which we saw last year too. But we've admittedly, I think the road courses have got better, and I think we were all in agreement that the street course in Chicago was a pretty good race. So.
Right.
There have been some high points. You're right, Truex fan. It has been a great season.
I bet he would say that last year wasn't very fun because he's a Truex fan, and last year was not very fun for Truex. And there is news about him, and we may get to that on this show. We may do that on the next show. But, Joe, you talked about putting food on the table, so we might as well just get to the entree, right? I mean, we're going to talk about Chase Elliott. We mentioned just a few minutes ago that Hendrick did not run very well at New Hampshire, which to me is kind of like WWT, and they didn't run very well either, except for Kyle Larson. And the one driver, the most popular driver in the sport right now, Chase Elliott, is 60 points behind. He has, I believe, 6 or 7 races left. So he has to make up at least 10 points. There's 5 races left?
I thought so.
Oh,
wait,
we're 20 races in. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26.
There's 6 races in. Right?
6 races.
Yeah, 6 races.
Yeah, math's hard. So, Common Core, guys. I'm a Common Core guy. Joe.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Joe.
Yeah.
He's good at it. So, but regardless, so he has to make up 10 points each race. And I believe the math was like he has to do or average 27 points, which people like AJ Allmendinger, Daniel Suarez, and other drivers have been doing. So the people in front of him have been doing a better job averaging more points than Chase Elliott has. Now, we just recently did our weekly show where I said I don't think Chase Elliott makes the playoffs. I also said I don't think AlexBowman makes the playoffs. Both of those drivers, while have been decent, the 2 top 5 Chase Elliott finishes here recently were number 1 because of strategy due to the rain in Chicago. He was not running well. I mean, he had a calico car looking cat because he wrecked in practice. And then number 2, in Atlanta, that race kind of flipped around too because of that race being shortened due to rain and pit stops. But my question to you, Joe, is the most popular driver, 27 years old. If he does not make the playoffs, can you think of the last time a driver of this magnitude, believed to be in his prime, some people thought, was the golden child to be the next insert Dale Earnhardt Jr., Jeff Gordon, whatever it may be. Do you think this would hurt his legacy long term if he finds a way not to make himself into the playoffs?
Well, I would say it almost has to, because when you look at drivers in the past that we could say that he had an injury, he was taken out for 6 races. It was 6 races, correct?
Do what?
Is that right? He was out for left. 6 races. That's yeah.
I believe
he was out for 6,
and then got suspended.
6 races. Okay, so and then he got suspended. The driver that I would compare him to in this same situation would actually be Kyle Busch. We saw Kyle Busch have a horrific injury at the start of what was that, 2013?
When he won the championship, it was 2015.
Yeah, and he breaks both his legs in an Xfinity race. Almost called it a Busch race, man. Xfinity race, and he's out for several weeks. I forget the length, but I think it was longer than 6 weeks, if I remember.
The All-Star race was his first race back.
Okay. So yeah, several weeks. Comes back. He pretty much dominates when he comes back. They give him a waiver. He gets in the playoff. He goes on to win a championship. Now we flip that around. We look at Chase Elliott this year. He has a snowboarding accident, the second race into the season. Misses 6 weeks, comes back, gets suspended a week after he's back for a week. And he's been, outside of a couple top 5 finishes, he's been terribly inconsistent. He hasn't looked like Chase Elliott at all. And I'd say the only way that you could really judge if we're looking at his legacy going forward, if he doesn't make the playoffs, is how he bounces back next year. And obviously everybody's going to speculate. There's people that are saying he's fine. He's just got to bounce back. He's missed a whole bunch of time this year. He'll get back to being Chase Elliott, and that may happen. But we also may have seen one of the biggest declines in NASCAR history to where he doesn't ever bounce back and he becomes a mediocre driver for the rest of his career. That's yet to be seen.
You think that's in the realm of possibilities?
I do. I mean, what other reason right now, other than the injury, does Chase Elliott have for his lackluster performance since he's come back? Are we going to blame it on the injury? If he comes out next year and it's the same old as this season, then, I definitely think his legacy is going to be tarnished. But I will say, on the off chance that he ends up winning a race in his next 6 races, gets in the playoffs, ends up dominating, makes the Final Four, I don't think we have a conversation at all to be talking about. But I don't see that happening. I'm actually rooting for Chase Elliott to get in. I hope he wins the race, but based on his performance since he's come back from that injury, I don't see it happening.
I look at this long term too, Joe, and think about the second half of last season as well, because Chase Elliott, he won the regular season championship, but in the second half of the regular season and the playoffs, because he won all of his races very early, he was not good. And he because he won the regular season championship, he essentially was able to just point himself into the next round, into the next round, into the next round, until he won at Talladega, which, I mean, that's Talladega. So you look at that from that standpoint, and then not making the Final Four, did not look particularly fast in the playoffs at all, comes out the beginning of the year, gets hurt the second race of the year, and you compared him to Kyle Busch. And the funny thing is that's the easiest thing to compare him to, because we're talking about two guys in their prime, championship caliber, drivers, things of that nature. I mean, Chase Elliott's already won a championship. Kyle never won a championship yet. And Kyle Busch had to win 5 races in a row to get into the top 30 in points because of all the races that he missed. I mean, he still barely pointed his way into being eligible, which for this year, that doesn't even matter. We're talking about Chase Elliott not even pointing himself in and still being able to look on the outside looking in. And I just think about that, Joe, and I think about a guy that, 27 years old, and I shouldn't hold this against him, but he's been anointed as, a really, really, really good driver. And there's other people that don't think so. I think it's hard to also, and you're a sports fan, separate the player/driver from his fan base. There's a lot of people I like on the Chase Elliott fan base, and there's a lot of people that drive me nuts on the Chase Elliott fan base, and I think about it sinister from that way too. But I also look at it this way as well, Joe. William Byron, Kyle Larson. If they were struggling as well, it would easy to say Hendrick just missed this year. Hendrick just doesn't have it this year. Kyle Larson probably should be winning the regular season championship if he didn't have bad luck. I honestly believe Kyle Larson has run into a string of bad luck. I think, was he at 5-6 DNFs this year? And maybe 2 of them are his own. Yeah, well, one for sure, but maybe 2.
Every race that he's finished has been consistently high. I mean, within the top 5. If he finishes a race, you're looking at it at least the top 10 finish, probably a top 5 if he finishes the race.
And then on top of it, William Byron, you and I joked around on this show kind of tongue in cheek because of, like Martin Truex and Kyle Busch last year, we thought they were essentially given a bad hand by Joe Gibbs Racing. But you and I joked around like, yeah, once William Byron is able to give Chase Elliott his car back, we'll see William Byron go back to being a decent driver, a good driver. I should say that. He's a good driver, but we won't see regular season champion William Byron. That's not been the case. William Byron has been consistent the entire year. It's been a little bit of a lull, but at the end of the day, every driver in 36 races is going to go through a little bit of a spurt. But he's been consistent as well. And Chase Elliott coming back, Joe, has not shown one single race that he's had the ability, the speed to win it. And I'm just sitting here looking at 27 years old. You're supposed to be at the prime of your career. And if you don't make the playoffs, we're talking 16 drivers, one of them in a Hendrick car. AlexBowman, we've all said as a vanilla driver, probably doesn't deserve the Hendrick spot, but essentially because Dale Earnhardt Jr. said, this is my guy, he got the Hendrick spot. I think that's something that's just really, really, really bad. And I think that, to me, long-term looking in, I go, what would Chase Elliott be like if he was at RCR? Right. Would he be able to be what he is today if he wasn't at Hendrick? We've had the now we know the difference with Kyle Busch. He was in Hendrick, he was in Joe Gibbs. Now he goes to RCR, and he's won 3 races. He's 3rd place in the regular season. Do you think the conversation starts to change, Joe, on the what if Chase Elliott truly wasn't in a top-tier ride?
No, I think you have to have that. I don't. So this is purely speculation. I don't want to dig too deep into it. But there is a certain factor right around that age, 25 to 30 years old, when people realize that they're not invincible. Every person that's over the age of 30 has had that experience in their life to where they've gotten hurt, or most people have, and it hits you very, very abruptly when you realize, you know what, I can get hurt, and when I do get hurt, it hurts really bad. I mean, we see that play out with football players all the time, right? You watch
Right.
you'll watch a running back that is great on their feet, and they hit 25, 26, they have a bad injury, and it's not that their body doesn't heal and they're not physically back, but mentally they can't come back from it because that's all they're thinking about. You see that on the football field all the time. You see it in other sports all the time, and not, kind of throwing NASCAR into that same arena is maybe that's something that we're seeing with Chase Elliott right now. I know that it wasn't a racing related injury, but what's his experience with physical pain and getting hurt in his life? Is this something that has put him into a mental funk that he can't come back from right now, and he's being too cautious and he's not racing like Chase Elliott because he's had that experience? And like I said, I don't want to read too much into it, but that could be something that's going on with him mentally right now.
I'll get to your first question, and then I'll get to the questions being asked in the chat, and we'll kind of dive into those too, Joe. Number one, the first player that comes to mind, this as well as anybody, is Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer, he's one of the best quarterbacks, at least we've seen, and I think objectively most of the NFL saw, and then had a horrific injury. I mean,
thanks, chemo, Van Olhoffen.
Yeah, and after that, you saw a player, Joe, afraid to climb the pocket. He just simply was afraid to climb the pocket because he got blindside hit in the knee on a dirty shot. And you're right. It took him all the way until, 8 years going to the Cardinals to finally get that out of his head. And then he ended up tearing his ACL just running out of the pocket, on a non-contact injury. But you're right. That did change. Now, the thing that I would say mentality-wise, and I don't know if it's from injury, Joe, but I look at the Denny Hamlin suspension. That's not a Chase Elliott move we are used to seeing. We're used to seeing Chase Elliott give a little bit too much, but never wants too much, if that makes sense. He's never that guy that wants to push the envelope, because and a lot of his fans would say that he's way too reserved because of that. He needs to have a little bit Ross Chastain in him, and maybe that would help him win more championships. Instead, he wants to race clean. His dad was a clean driver. Everybody liked him, things of that nature. And then we see that where he literally right hooks somebody into the wall. Yeah. And something is not mentally right. Is it frustrated at himself? Is it frustrated with the injury? Is it, I don't know. Is it performance-based, healing-based? I don't know what it is, Joe, but I would say something mentally is there.
Well, and I'll say we kind of even seen it a little bit in his first weeks back, where he's been more vocal to the media, more vocal than he's ever been on stating his opinion on certain things. And I kind of found that out of character for him, to say the least, when he came back from injury. And I thought maybe he was trying a new PR thing, but I just don't think Chase is there mentally right now.
So we'll go to our first question, and Zach asked, do you think momentum in racing plays into success as compared to momentum in team sports? And I don't want to make this always about my driver, but I look at it this way. When Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. both won this year, you heard both of them say at one point in their life, or one point over the last year, they questioned could they get back there, meaning victory lane or an elite spot in this sport. I absolutely think it pays, or it has a role in this sport, whether it's your pit crew not wanting to screw up, your driver not wanting to screw up, your crew chief not wanting to screw up, everybody in this sport, because you're relying on so many different people. Joe, you're a football guy. The quarterback looks like shit if the offensive line is shit, no matter what. I don't care how good of a quarterback you have to rely on other people. And I think a lot of that, is given to the driver, how good he is. But if your pit crew sucks, if your crew chief sucks, you're going to suck. I mean, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I think when you get that bad juju going, it just seems like, it's just a snowball that continues to roll downhill. And I think we saw that with veteran guys like Kyle Busch and Martin Truex last year. Joe, do you agree with that?
No, I do. I think momentum plays a huge role in any sport, and NASCAR is no exception. I think, NASCAR is a team sport when it comes from your pit crew to your crew chief to the driver to the spotter. That's all one cohesive team. And when a team is gelling, no matter what sport it is, from basketball to NASCAR to football, you play better. And when you could stack up in NASCAR a couple top tens, and then you stack up a top five, and then you get a win, that's momentum that's carrying you that way. That's your team realizing, your driver, your team, your crew chief realizing that you could push the envelope that much farther because your team is that good. Now, NASCAR has variables in it that you don't see in any other sport. You're relying on mechanical things within your car, and sure, those things can always hurt you. But outside of that, the performance of your team definitely can be carried by momentum. That's no exception from any other sport that we see. So I think momentum is definitely huge in NASCAR.
Yeah, and I think too, Joe, like in sports, you never want to play tight. You always want to be loose. Not like
Right.
carefree, but you want to be loose. And I think, when you're a driver that's struggling or you're a pit crew that's struggling, you try to gain more of something rather than just let things play naturally. Like if you're on pit road and your driver, has been suffering a little bit on the track, he's not choosing the right line, or maybe he's not giving the right setup. So you, the tire changer, want to get that extra 10th off pit road because you think that might give you 3 laps or 3 positions on pit road. So what do? You rush. You tighten up. You try to make more than what it is. Therefore, the lug nut doesn't get tight all the way. Or you try to pull the jack out because you want to get that extra 10th to get around the other side, and the guy on the right front tire is not all the way done tightening up the wheel. Those are the type of things when you see success and momentum in NASCAR compile upon each other, or failure for that matter. When you see William Byron's crew, Joe, knowing they got a chance to win week in and week out, they put up the best freaking pit stops every single week. And I don't think that's by mistake. Yes, they're talented, but they know their driver has a chance for them to win. So the last thing they need to be told is, hey, try to get every inch of it. Instead, it's, hey, don't screw this up. We got a good car. Do your job. Roll out. That's it.
All right.
And, I think we see that. The next
Some
question,
of the best. Oh,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was some of the best sports team in history, some of the best race teams in history. Their success is kind of predicated on the fact that they rely and they understand that they need those other people. When you have confidence in the other people on your team, in NASCAR or any other sport, you're going to do your job that much better because you know that you don't have to do somebody else's. So
Right. And I think, Marvin Lewis, when he came out with the do your job.
Yeah, do your job.
Gap responsibility, things of that. Football is such a great sport for that reason, for you to try to not do too much. Joe, if you don't set the edge because you're trying to get the guy in the backfield for a 3-yard loss,
right.
Well, now you just gave up a 15-yard run. And this does apply in NASCAR too. Like if you're trying to gain an extra second on the track, instead of just letting you get to pit road and get your first, adjustments made, you're going to end up wrecking. Just things of that nature that, I think the average racing fan doesn't think about that. And when it's going your way, it goes your way. 2 years ago, it went Kyle Larson's way. He could not screw up. He did everything right. Last year, it was a little bit of a step down, and Joe, things that you were used to 2 years ago didn't play out the same way.
Right.
Now it's probably back to the mean where he's really, really good, but, winning 10 races is probably out of the question, at least for a few years while we get these cars sorted out. But Truex fan says, do you think Chase will win a race? And if so, how many? On the show where we predicted the playoff drivers, I predicted that Chase will not win a race and get into the playoffs. I think there's a caveat there that he could win a race while not being in the playoffs. I think that's a possibility, but I do not think he'll win a race before the playoffs begin. And one of those reasons, and this might seem silly to you, is because one of the races that he typically does really well at, we had some breaking news today, and I'll get to that here in a minute as well. But, Joe, do you think Chase will win a race?
I don't. And for the same reasons that we're kind of talking about. How many so when he has not looked like a championship driver this year. His team has not looked like a championship team. They've made some good decisions and got him some good finishes this year. But when you look at sports in general and you see a team pressing to get in the playoffs, you either see one or two things happen. You either see that team take over and become dominant, or you see that team fall apart. And what I think we are seeing right now is, and we have seen it since the injury, is the Chase Elliott as a driver and a team kind of falling apart. I think that they're pressing way too much. They're on the time clock now to win a race. They know they got to win to get in. And I think that's going to be to their detriment at this point. I don't think it's going to help them. I think if they were safe on points right now and he was within, at least grasping distance of getting into the playoffs, or even above the cut line, I think that his possibility of winning a race would expand exponentially. But right now, I think that team is pressing way too much. I think he's pressing way too much, and I don't think he wins a race in the next 6 races.
And I think, Truex fan, you saw this last year with Martin Truex. He was right there on the line. He had a great season compared to Chase Elliott. Correct me if I'm wrong. He was like regular season in 3rd or 5th place. Him and Ryan Blaney were interchangeable, 3rd or 5th place in points. It's not like they were having bad seasons. They just happened to be in seasons where you had to win to get into the playoffs. So you saw Truex pushing the envelope on different things, and it did not work out. And then on top of that, we're talking about that momentum. Then Martin Truex started doing things like trying to wreck Ross Chastain in the middle of racing in the top 10 and end up finishing in 25th by spinning himself out twice. You have things that don't go your way by, your car brakes blowing up at Bristol. Those type of things, that's what we're talking about. And right now, Chase is way, way, way having I'm not trying not to Joe Biden this. He doesn't have to win to get in, but he has to be really, 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 really good. And there's a bunch of other guys that have to be really bad, and that's not happening right now.
Right. No, he's got to win to get in. I mean, I think outside of anything that we could fathom or come up with, I think realistically you have to sit down and realize, by the numbers, can he not win and get in? Yeah, he can, I think, theoretically, but I don't think that's going to happen. Of course, they said Donald Trump wouldn't be president either. So,
right. So one reason why I've kind of changed my tune on this, and Truex, we'll get to that on a different episode here very, very soon, is this right here is big news for me. Shane Van Gisbergen has been announced as coming back for the Indy Road Course on Project 91. And the more and more they talk, Joe, the more and more he might actually run next year in NASCAR. But again, you talk about where can Chase Elliott win a race? Well, I remember you saying, well, there's 2 road course races. I know this guy has won 1 race. He's only participated in 1 race. But damn, he did really, really, really good the entire week. And that is now one guy who can knock Chase Elliott off the pedestal winning a race.
And I'm sorry. Anybody that comes in and wins their first NASCAR race that they've ever run, and granted, I know that those cars that he drives, after doing a little research, are pretty similar to NASCAR. They're not next gen cars, but they're fairly similar. This guy dominated. This guy dominated in Chicago. I mean, make no mistake about it. There wasn't a NASCAR driver on the same planet with him at the Chicago Street Course. And if he brings that to the Indy Road Course, it's going to be the same thing. The only thing that keeps this guy from winning the Indy Road Course is mechanical failure, or he accidentally wrecks himself. That's it.
That's some strong words. The only thing I'll say that the NASCAR drivers have an advantage of this time is not everybody's never ran this road course before.
That's true.
SVG's never ran the Indy Road Course. There are other drivers that have won it. But at the end of the day, at his age and what we've seen with his talent, Joe, we definitely think he's going to compete. And I think that's the point, is that if he got a top 5, at this point, with the expectations he set for us, if he goes outside the top 5, we'll think that's a disappointing race.
Yeah, he's out. He's cut.
So
I'll tell you this: as long as he stays away from Kyle Larson in turn 1, he should be okay.
I was going to say his teammate and Ross Chastain.
Yeah, that too.
from him, he should be okay.
The Indy Road Course was the race last year that Kyle Larson just drove through the turn and hit Ty Gibbs,
Dillon.
right?
Yeah,
Ty Dillon.
Yeah,
Ty Dillon, yeah.
And then Hendrick said that he claimed that his brakes failed, and Hendrick was like,
no, they didn't.
That never happened.
And then apparently they did fail because they did some analytics on the vehicle, right? So
yeah, it was a mess. It was weird that they actually made headline news by making a statement and said Kyle Larson's brakes did not fail.
Yeah.
Like, that was the weird part. We're like, okay, let's say they didn't. Why are you announcing this?
Yeah.
I mean, what is Robestus Brakes putting you up against the wall and says, God damn it, either you clear our name or else.
Yeah. And then they did analytics and they clearly failed. Like there was no braking at all. There was no slowing down for him at all. So, and Kyle, I don't think Kyle Larson has a death wish where he's like, hey, let's T-bone somebody at 180 miles an hour.
Yeah. And it was right in front of my face. That's exactly what happened. I mean, he got airborne and T-boned Ty Dillon. It was intense. What was it, like 160?
Yeah,
150 or 160 mile an hour?
Well, he was coming in. And that's a hard braking turn one there at the Indy Road Course, and he didn't slow down at all.
No, none.
And he tried to turn, and you can't turn when you're going that fast.
And then Ross Chastain didn't slow down, and he took a shortcut.
Yeah. Which they park a truck there now, so that's not going to happen anymore.
Yeah. So those were fun memories. But let me ask you this, Joe. Do you think with SVG coming back to the Indy Road Course and Richard Childress Racing, they announced that they're bringing in a kind of a road course ringer as well for the 33 car. Do you think SVG will be the odds-on favorite at Indy?
Yeah, and I'll be putting money on him, actually. And I think, everybody messed up because I think he was like, I don't remember what his odds were this last race, but I mean, they had
to be over plus 5,000.
Yeah, they were up there. I mean, he was down there. I mean, he was there with the Austin Dillons. He was around there. So,
yeah,
it was like, I picked him in fantasy, but I didn't put any money on him that week. And I should have, because he would have won big money. You put $20 on plus 5,000, you're taking home a decent payday.
Dude, you're speaking Australian to your family the rest of the night.
Right. Hey, good day.
Yeah.
Good day, mate.
Crikey, this guy makes some money.
Well, and he's not Australian, though. He's New Zealand.
Oh, New Zealand. Yeah. Same difference. They both are.
It's not the same.
I mean, it kind of is the same.
It's not.
If you saw a guy standing here and a guy standing here, and one was Australian and one was New Zealand, would you be able to tell the difference?
Yes.
How's that?
Well, for one, I went to school with a girl from New Zealand, and the accent is a little different.
Okay.
And talking to her mom, I guess I can't, as an unknowledgeable person on the subject, articulate why, but the accents are a little different, and you could tell. I mean, could you tell the difference between a British person and an Australian?
Tan.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, no, you can because you've heard it enough.
Oh, well, if you hear it, yes. But I'm just saying, if I was just looking at them.
But I would say that if English was your second language and you heard both of those talk,
I'd be scared.
You probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
No, and we both know that at any given time, both countries will give up.
I learned in the Army that both Puerto Ricans and Mexicans speak Spanish, but they can't understand each other.
I know. Isn't that wild?
That is wild.
Or people from Spain as well.
You're right. Yeah.
And we can understand people from England. We just did everything we could to make sure we didn't have to.
Right. They put mayonnaise on their French fries.
What?
Yeah. Weirdos.
That's awful.
And they call them chips.
Yeah, well, they're dumb. Shout out to everybody watching in the United Kingdom. All three of you. We appreciate you.
Yeah, we do.
Well, Joe, we will have another show here. We'll decide. It depends on what's going on in the worldwide of our lives tomorrow night. Because you saw the live stream for the SRX race was a good success. We had quite a few people tune in for that. So contemplating doing that tomorrow. Also not sure because it's the same track.
Yeah.
But we shall see. And we will be talking SRX as well. Is it actually good for NASCAR? Do you and I believe they help each other out? Martin Truex or Truex Fan 19, we will talk about the future and what Martin Truex has said on his NASCAR future. And also we will give our power rankings. Where do we think drivers are right now with less than 10 races to go in the regular season? And who do we think can maintain that going into the playoffs? But Joe, do you have any closing remarks?
No, great show. I'll see you sometime this week, and we'll continue the conversation.
That's right. We appreciate you listening to us here on Stuck in the Catch Fence. We will be with you next time. So long. Toodles.